Jenkins's heart raced as Ambassador Merrick's eyes rolled back, his blue-tinged body crumpling to the polished floor of the diplomatic reception hall. One moment, the Bajoran had been eagerly inquiring about human reproduction. The next, he was sprawled unconscious, victim to an apparent cardiac event triggered by Jenkins's explanation of human mating rituals. As medical staff rushed to attend to the fallen ambassador, Jenkins felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He'd never imagined that a simple conversation about human biology could lead to such a dramatic turn of events. The xenobiologist had been caught off guard when Merrick approached him, expressing an interest in observing or even participating in a human breeding session. Jenkins had fumbled through an explanation of courtship, consent, and the intricacies of human mating practices, watching as Merrick's expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to outright alarm. Now, as he followed the medical team rushing Merrick to the infirmary, Jenkins replayed the conversation in his mind. He'd been so focused on maintaining diplomatic decorum that he'd failed to consider the potential physiological impact of his words on the alien ambassador. It wasn't until a Bajoran doctor informed him of their species' unique cardiovascular system, highly sensitive to emotional stress, that Jenkins fully grasped the gravity of the situation. In the sterile confines of the medical bay, Jenkins watched anxiously as Merrick regained consciousness. The ambassador's skin gradually returned to its normal hue, and his breathing stabilized. As Merrick's eyes fluttered open, Jenkins steeled himself for the diplomatic fallout that was sure to follow. To his surprise, Merrick's first words were not of anger or accusation, but of continued curiosity. "Your mating rituals," the ambassador wheezed, "they are far more complex than I had anticipated. How do your people manage such intricate social dynamics?" Jenkins found himself torn between relief at Merrick's apparent lack of hostility and a growing awareness of his own unexpected reaction to the alien's presence. Despite the stress of the situation, or perhaps because of it, Jenkins couldn't help but notice the graceful lines of Merrick's facial ridges, the depth of his dark eyes. He pushed the thoughts aside, acutely aware of the strict regulations governing interspecies relationships. As Merrick recovered, Jenkins was tasked with educating the ambassador on human biology and customs to prevent future misunderstandings. Their frequent meetings became a delicate dance of professional obligation and personal interest, with Jenkins constantly reminding himself of the importance of maintaining boundaries. Outside the medical bay, the incident had sparked a diplomatic firestorm. Human and Bajoran officials scrambled to smooth over the situation, wary of the potential impact on their fragile alliance. Anti-alien factions on Earth seized upon the event, spinning it into propaganda against extraterrestrial visitors. Jenkins found himself thrust into the center of a growing controversy, forced to defend not only his actions, but the very notion of interspecies cooperation. As tensions mounted, Jenkins couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Merrick's interest in human reproduction than mere curiosity. The ambassador's questions, while seemingly innocent, often probed at specific aspects of human genetics and biological adaptability. A nagging suspicion grew in Jenkins's mind. Could Merrick's inquiries be part of a larger Bajoran plan to study and potentially exploit human genetic material? With the weight of potential diplomatic disaster on his shoulders and his own conflicted feelings toward Merrick, Jenkins found himself at the center of a complex web of personal desires, political intrigue, and looming threats to humanity's place in the galactic community. As he prepared for another meeting with the recuperating ambassador, Jenkins couldn't help but wonder how a simple conversation about human breeding had spiraled into a situation that could reshape the future of interspecies relations. As Jenkins left the medical bay, his mind raced with the implications of his recent interactions with Ambassador Merrick. The Bajoran's continued curiosity about human reproduction, despite the near-fatal incident, struck him as more than mere academic interest. Jenkins couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deeper motive behind Merrick's probing questions. His suspicions were confirmed days later when he received a communiqué from his superiors. Jenkins was to be assigned as Merrick's primary liaison, tasked with preventing further misunderstandings and fostering positive relations between humans and Bajorans. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very man who had inadvertently caused a diplomatic incident was now responsible for smoothing it over. Their first official meeting took place in a small, nondescript conference room within the diplomatic compound. Jenkins entered to find Merrick already seated, datapad in hand, those dark eyes fixed on the door with an intensity that made Jenkins's pulse quicken. "Ambassador Merrick," Jenkins said, inclining his head in greeting, "I hope you're feeling better." Merrick's lips curved into a slight smile. "Much better, thank you. Your medical staff is quite skilled, though I must admit I'm more fascinated than ever by the intricacies of human physiology." As they settled into their discussion, Jenkins found himself captivated by Merrick's genuine enthusiasm for scientific exchange. Hours passed as they delved into comparative xenobiology, with Jenkins explaining various aspects of human biology and Merrick offering insights into Bajoran physiology. It was during one of these sessions, nearly 2 weeks into their collaborative work, that Merrick finally revealed the true nature of the Bajoran interest in human reproduction. "Jenkins," Merrick began, his voice low and serious, "there's something I need to share with you. The reason for our intense focus on human reproductive capabilities goes beyond mere scientific curiosity." Jenkins leaned forward, his suspicions crystallizing into reality. "The Bajoran people are facing a crisis," Merrick continued. "Our population is in decline due to genetic issues that have plagued us for generations. We believe that studying human DNA might hold the key to our survival." The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Jenkins's shoulders. He understood the potential implications, both positive and negative, of sharing human genetic information with an alien species. "Merrick, I'm not sure how to respond to this. The exchange of genetic material between our species could have far-reaching consequences." Before Merrick could reply, an alarm blared through the compound. Security personnel rushed past the conference room, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly chaotic hallway. Jenkins and Merrick exchanged a look of concern before hurrying to investigate. They emerged from the building to find a sea of angry faces pressed against the compound's perimeter fence. Protesters waved signs with slogans like "Earth for Humans" and "No Alien DNA." A security officer approached them, his expression grim. "Sir, it's a group calling themselves Humans First. They're demanding the expulsion of all alien visitors. It's getting ugly out there." Jenkins felt a chill run down his spine as he scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on a particularly large banner bearing his own face, the word "traitor" scrawled across it in angry red letters. Over the following days, the protests intensified. Jenkins found himself at the center of a media firestorm, his every move scrutinized and his loyalty to humanity questioned. Despite the mounting pressure, he continued his work with Merrick, driven by a mix of scientific curiosity and a growing personal connection to the Bajoran ambassador. It was during a late-night session in one of the compound's laboratories that Merrick finally broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "Jenkins," Merrick said, setting aside a holographic display of human chromosomes, "I've been authorized to formally request human genetic samples for our research. I understand the sensitivity of this matter, but please believe me when I say that the future of my people may depend on it." Jenkins ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. The potential benefits of such cooperation were immense, not just for the Bajorans, but for humanity as well. The advances in genetic research could revolutionize medicine for both species. And yet, the risk of misuse or unintended consequences loomed large in his mind. Before Jenkins could formulate a response, the lab's security system flashed red. A computerized voice announced a breach in the compound's outer defenses. "Warning, unauthorized entry detected. All personnel proceed to designated safe zones." Jenkins's eyes met Merrick's, both recognizing the gravity of the situation. "It must be the extremist faction of Humans First," Jenkins said, moving quickly to secure the lab's entrance. "They've been threatening more drastic action for days." As they heard the sounds of struggle echoing through the corridors, Jenkins and Merrick worked in tandem to fortify their position. Jenkins's knowledge of human biology and Merrick's understanding of Bajoran technology merged as they improvised a defense system. Using a combination of pheromone synthesizers and modified sonic emitters, they created a non-lethal deterrent that would incapacitate human attackers without causing permanent harm. As the lab door shuddered under the impact of the intruder's attempts to breach it, Jenkins and Merrick stood side by side, their creation humming to life. When the door finally gave way, the attackers were met with an invisible wall of disorienting sensations. One by one, they collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. In the aftermath of the attack, as security forces secured the compound and medical teams tended to the incapacitated intruders, Jenkins found himself reevaluating everything. The collaboration with Merrick had not only potentially saved their lives, but had also demonstrated the power of their combined knowledge. As dawn broke over the compound, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn grounds, Jenkins made a decision. He would propose a new path forward, one that could address the Bajorans' needs, advance human scientific understanding, and potentially ease the growing tensions on Earth. With Merrick by his side, Jenkins prepared to present his idea to the gathered officials from both species. The future of human-Bajoran relations hung in the balance, and Jenkins couldn't help but feel that his personal future and his deepening connection with Merrick was irrevocably entwined with the outcome of this proposal. Jenkins took a deep breath, steadying himself as he faced the gathered officials. Merrick stood beside him, a reassuring presence in the tense atmosphere of the conference room. The events of the past few hours had shaken everyone, but Jenkins knew this was their best chance to move forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the room, "what we've witnessed today is both a tragedy and an opportunity. The attack on our facility demonstrates the very real dangers of xenophobia and mistrust. But our response, our cooperation, shows us a better path forward." As Jenkins outlined his proposal for a joint human-Bajoran research initiative, he could see the mix of skepticism and interest on the faces before him. He detailed the potential benefits, advancements in genetic research that could solve reproductive issues for both species, improved medical technologies, and a foundation for lasting peace between their peoples. The discussion that followed was heated at times, with concerns raised about security, ethical implications, and the potential for public backlash. Jenkins addressed each point calmly, drawing on his experiences with Merrick to illustrate the power of collaboration. As the meeting concluded, Jenkins felt a spark of hope. While no immediate decision had been reached, the officials agreed to consider the proposal seriously. It was a start. In the weeks that followed, Jenkins found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The anti-alien group Humans First intensified their protests, staging increasingly violent demonstrations outside the diplomatic compound. Jenkins watched from his office window as security forces struggled to maintain order, the angry chants of the protesters echoing through the streets. "This is getting out of hand," Merrick observed, joining Jenkins at the window. "Your people seem frightened." Jenkins nodded grimly. "Fear of the unknown, it's a powerful motivator." As if in response to the escalating tensions, Earth's government implemented stricter security measures. The diplomatic compound became a fortress, with enhanced scanners and armed guards at every entrance. While these steps were meant to protect those working on the project, Jenkins couldn't help but feel the suffocating effects of the increased security. Despite the challenges, Jenkins and Merrick pressed on with their work. Long hours in the lab brought them closer, their shared passion for science bridging the gap between their species. Jenkins found himself captivated by Merrick's intellect, the way the Bajoran's eyes lit up when discussing a new discovery. One evening, as they pored over genetic data, Jenkins became acutely aware of Merrick's proximity. The Bajoran leaned in close, pointing out an interesting anomaly in the human DNA sequence. Jenkins felt his heart rate quicken, the scent of Merrick's alien biology both familiar and intoxicating. "Jenkins," Merrick said softly, "I've been meaning to ask." The moment was shattered by a sharp knock at the lab door. Dr. Hartley, Jenkins's longtime rival, strode in without waiting for a response. "Working late again, I see," Hartley remarked, his tone dripping with false congeniality. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything personal." Jenkins stepped back, suddenly conscious of how close he and Merrick had been standing. "Just reviewing some data, Dr. Hartley. Did you need something?" Hartley's eyes narrowed, flicking between Jenkins and Merrick. "Just checking on progress. We wouldn't want anything to compromise the integrity of our work, would we?" As Hartley left, Jenkins couldn't shake the feeling that his rival was looking for any excuse to discredit him. He would need to be more careful. The situation took an unexpected turn when a Bajoran medical ship appeared in Earth's orbit. The sudden arrival sent ripples of concern through the military and political establishments. Jenkins was summoned to an emergency meeting with Earth's Defense Council. This ship claims to carry advanced reproductive technology, Admiral Chen explained, her face grim. They're requesting permission to dock and transfer equipment to our research facility. This could be exactly what we need, Jenkins argued, sensing the council's hesitation. Their technology could accelerate our research significantly. After hours of debate and tense negotiations with the Bajoran ship's captain, a stern woman named Coral, Earth's government reluctantly agreed to allow the ship to dock. Jenkins was tasked with overseeing the transfer of equipment, a responsibility he approached with both excitement and caution. As Jenkins led his team to the docking bay, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This could be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. The massive Bajoran ship loomed before them, its sleek design a stark contrast to the utilitarian Earth vessels. The docking process began smoothly, but as the ships connected, an alarm blared through the station. Red warning lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced a critical malfunction in the docking mechanism. "We're losing stability," a technician shouted over the din. "If we don't correct this, we could lose both ships." Jenkins's mind raced, drawing on everything he'd learned about human engineering and Bajoran technology. In a flash of inspiration, he saw a solution. "I need a spacesuit," he announced, already moving towards the equipment locker. "I'm going out there." Despite protests from his team, Jenkins suited up and stepped into the airlock. As the outer door opened, he was confronted with the vast emptiness of space and the precarious connection between the two ships. Working methodically, Jenkins navigated the exterior of the docking bay. He located the malfunctioning mechanism and with steady hands began to manually override the system. Each movement was calculated, the knowledge gained from his work with Marek guiding his actions. As Jenkins completed the final adjustment, he felt the ship stabilize. A cheer erupted over his comm system as he made his way back to the airlock, exhausted but triumphant. The aftermath of the incident brought unexpected revelations. An investigation uncovered evidence of sabotage by a member of Humans First, who had infiltrated the station's maintenance crew. The news sent shockwaves through the public, leading to a crackdown on the organization and a shift in public opinion. Jenkins found his position on the project solidified, much to Dr. Hartley's visible frustration. The successful handling of the crisis accelerated plans for the joint research mission, with Earth's government fast-tracking the approval process. As preparations entered their final stages, Jenkins and Marek found themselves working even more closely together. The life-threatening incident at the docking bay had brought their feelings for each other into sharp focus, but both understood the delicate nature of their positions. One evening, as they worked late in the lab, Marek broke the comfortable silence between them. "Jenkins," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "I want you to know how much I've valued our time together. Your insights, your dedication, they've meant more to me than I can express." Jenkins felt his pulse quicken, aware of the weight behind Marek's words. "Marek, Before he could respond, Jenkins's comm unit buzzed with an urgent message. He was being summoned to a high-level meeting immediately. Arriving at the conference room, Jenkins found a group of solemn-faced officials waiting for him. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Jenkins," she began, "we have a proposition for you, one that could change everything." As the Admiral outlined the proposal, an experimental procedure to temporarily alter Jenkins's biology, allowing him to serve as a physical interface between human and Bajoran genetic research, Jenkins felt the weight of the decision before him. This could be the key to unlocking unprecedented advancements for both species, but at what personal cost? Jenkins' mind raced with the implications. His gaze drifted to the window, where Earth hung suspended in the void of space. Somewhere out there, Marek's homeworld faced its own challenges. The fate of two species might rest on his decision. With a deep breath, Jenkins turned back to face the waiting officials, ready to hear more about this groundbreaking proposal that could forever alter the course of his life and the future of interspecies relations. Jenkins listened intently as Admiral Chen laid out the details of the experimental procedure. The proposal was as revolutionary as it was dangerous, temporarily altering Jenkins' biology to serve as a physical interface between human and Bajoran genetic research. This could be the key to unlocking unprecedented advancements for both species, Admiral Chen explained, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. But we need you to understand the risks involved. As the briefing continued, Jenkins's mind raced with the implications. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, each breath feeling heavier than the last. He glanced around the room, taking in the mix of hope and apprehension on the faces of the gathered officials. "I'll need time to consider this," Jenkins said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Chen nodded. "Of course, but please understand, time is of the essence. We'll need your decision within 48 hours. As Jenkins left the conference room, his head spinning with the enormity of what he just heard, he nearly collided with Dr. Hartley. The other scientist's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. "Everything all right, Jenkins?" Hartley asked, his tone falsely casual. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jenkins brushed past him without responding, too preoccupied to engage. He didn't notice Hartley's lingering gaze, or the way the man's hand tightened around his datapad. The next day, as Jenkins grappled with his decision, the world exploded around him. News feeds blazed with headlines about the proposed genetic modification. Protesters gathered outside the research facility, their angry chants echoing through the halls. "How did this get out?" Jenkins demanded, storming into Admiral Chen's office. The Admiral's face was grim. "We're investigating the leak, but right now we need to focus on damage control." Over the next few days, Jenkins found himself at the center of a media firestorm. He was shuttled from one evaluation to another, subjected to rigorous physical and psychological tests. Cameras flashed in his face as he entered and exited the facility, reporters shouting questions he couldn't answer. Through it all, Marek remained a steadfast presence. The Bajoran scientist stood by Jenkins during the most grueling examinations, offering quiet words of encouragement. "Your people seem frightened," Marek observed one evening as they watched footage of the protests from Jenkins' office. Jenkins sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They are. Change is never easy, especially when it involves something so fundamental." Marek placed a hand on Jenkins's shoulder, the touch sending a jolt through him. "What you're considering, it's incredibly brave and important." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos outside faded away. Jenkins felt the pull between them, stronger than ever in the face of the challenges they were facing. The moment was broken by a sharp knock at the door. A stern-faced man in a military uniform entered without waiting for a response. "Dr. Jenkins, I'm General Marcus Steele. I've been appointed to oversee security for this operation." Jenkins straightened, instantly wary of the newcomer's hard gaze. "General, I wasn't aware we needed additional security." Steele's eyes flicked to Marek, then back to Jenkins. "Given recent events, the government feels it's necessary. I'll be implementing new protocols effective immediately." As Steele outlined the enhanced security measures, Jenkins felt a growing unease. The general's tone left no room for argument, but the implications were clear. Jenkins was now under constant surveillance. Despite the mounting pressure, Jenkins found clarity in the quiet moments between tests and briefings. The potential benefits of the procedure, the chance to bridge the gap between species in a way never before possible, outweighed the personal risks. When he announced his decision to proceed, the reaction was mixed. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly, while General Steele's frown deepened. Marek's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and concern. The day of the procedure arrived with a tense atmosphere hanging over the facility. Jenkins was prepped in a sterile room, the hum of advanced medical equipment filling the air. Human and Bajoran medical experts moved around him with practiced efficiency. As the anesthesia began to take effect, Jenkins caught a glimpse of Marek watching from an observation room. Their eyes met briefly before darkness claimed him. Jenkins awoke to a world transformed. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. As he blinked away the fog of sedation, he became aware of the rapid-fire thoughts racing through his mind, processing information at an unprecedented speed. "How do you feel?" a doctor asked, leaning over him. Jenkins opened his mouth to respond and was surprised by the torrent of words that flowed out, describing his sensations in minute detail. The medical team exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and concern on their faces. Over the next few days, as Jenkins recovered, the full extent of his transformation became apparent. He could absorb and analyze complex scientific data in moments, bridging gaps in understanding between human and Bajoran biology that had stumped researchers for years. But with these new abilities came unwanted attention. Jenkins caught glimpses of unfamiliar faces watching him, their eyes glowing with an unsettling fervor. General Steele's security measures suddenly seemed less excessive and more prescient. The attack, when it came, was swift and brutal. Jenkins was working late in the lab when the power cut out. In the darkness, he heard the sound of breaking glass and muffled shouts. Using his heightened senses, Jenkins navigated through the chaos. He could hear the intruders' footsteps, smell their unfamiliar Bajoran biology. As he rounded a corner, a hand clamped over his mouth. "Don't struggle," a voice hissed in his ear. "We're here to liberate you." Before Jenkins could react, an explosion rocked the building. In the confusion that followed, he felt himself being dragged towards an exit. His mind raced, calculating angles and forces, searching for a way out. Suddenly, the hallway filled with light and sound. General Steele's voice boomed through a megaphone, ordering the intruders to stand down. Jenkins saw a mixed team of human and Bajoran security forces advancing, their weapons trained on his captors. In the standoff that followed, Jenkins found himself at the center of a tug-of-war between species. The extremist Bajorans saw him as the key to a new, superior hybrid race. Steele viewed him as a potential security threat to be contained. It was Merrick who broke the impasse, stepping forward with his hands raised. "He's not a weapon or a specimen," the Bajoran scientist declared. "He's a person and a vital part of our research. This is exactly the kind of conflict our work is trying to prevent." In the tense moments that followed, Jenkins felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. His unique position, straddling the line between human and Bajoran, suddenly seemed less like a scientific breakthrough and more like a diplomatic tightrope. As the situation was defused and the extremists taken into custody, Jenkins realized that his transformation was more than just physical. He had become a living embodiment of the project's goals, a bridge between species in the most literal sense. In the days that followed, as the research team regrouped and security protocols were once again tightened, Jenkins found himself grappling with his new identity. He was neither fully human nor Bajoran, yet he held the key to understanding both. As plans for the move to the neutral space station accelerated, Jenkins threw himself into the work with renewed vigor. His unique abilities allowed the team to make leaps in their research, bringing them closer to solutions for both species' reproductive issues. But in quiet moments, usually late at night in the lab, Jenkins felt the weight of his transformation. He caught Merrick watching him sometimes, the Bajoran's eyes filled with a mixture of scientific curiosity and something deeper, more personal. "Does it bother you?" Jenkins asked one night, unable to keep the question contained any longer. "What I've become?" Merrick was silent for a long moment, his gaze steady. "You've always been unique, Jenkins," he said finally. "This has just amplified it." As they stood there, surrounded by the fruits of their joint research, Jenkins felt the pull between them stronger than ever. But he also felt the eyes of the world upon them, the hopes and fears of two species resting on their work. The announcement came on a Tuesday. The joint research mission would be moving to the neutral space station ahead of schedule. Jenkins, with his unique physiology and abilities, would play a central role in this next phase. As the team began preparations for the move, Jenkins found himself at a crossroads. His transformation had opened up new avenues of research, new possibilities for understanding between humans and Bajorans. But it had also set him apart, making him something other than what he had been. Standing at the viewport, watching shuttles ferry equipment to the waiting ships, Jenkins contemplated the journey ahead. He was no longer just a scientist, but a living bridge between worlds. The challenges ahead were daunting, but as he felt Marek's presence beside him, Jenkins knew he wouldn't face them alone. The stars beckoned, holding the promise of new discoveries and the potential for lasting peace between their peoples. As Jenkins turned away from the viewport, ready to face whatever came next, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. The gleaming hull of Nexus 1 loomed before them, a testament to interspecies cooperation and scientific ambition. Jenkins gazed out the shuttle viewport, his genetically modified mind processing every detail of the massive structure. Beside him, Marek's eyes shone with excitement. "It's beautiful," the Bajoran scientist breathed. Jenkins nodded, a mix of anticipation and apprehension churning in his gut. As the shuttle docked, he steeled himself for the next phase of their groundbreaking work. The moment Jenkins stepped onto Nexus 1, his body betrayed him. His throat constricted, and he stumbled, gasping for air. Marek caught him before he hit the deck, alarm etched across his features. "Jenkins, what's wrong?" Marek's voice sounded distant, muffled by the roaring in Jenkins's ears. Through watering eyes, Jenkins saw Admiral Chen rush forward, barking orders into her comm unit. The world spun, and darkness crept at the edges of his vision. His last conscious thought was of the irony. He'd survived a radical genetic modification only to be felled by a space station's air. Jenkins awoke in the medical bay, the sterile white surfaces a stark contrast to the chaos of his arrival. Dr. Ilara Voss stood over him, her dark eyes sharp with concentration as she studied a holographic display of his vitals. "Welcome back, Dr. Jenkins," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "You gave us quite a scare." Jenkins tried to speak, but his throat felt raw. Dr. Voss offered him a sip of water before explaining his condition. "You've had a severe allergic reaction to the station's atmospheric blend," she said. "Your unique physiology is complicating matters." Over the next few days, Jenkins underwent a battery of tests and treatments. Dr. Voss worked tirelessly, her expertise in xenobiology proving invaluable as she navigated the complexities of his modified genome. Marek was a constant presence, dividing his time between assisting Dr. Voss and continuing their research. Jenkins caught glimpses of tension between them, subtle disagreements over approach, clashing hypotheses about his condition. One afternoon, as Dr. Voss adjusted his medication, Jenkins overheard a heated exchange outside his room. "Your assumptions about human biology are outdated," Dr. Voss snapped. "If we're going to solve this, we need to think beyond traditional parameters. And your lack of understanding about Bajoran physiology is limiting our options," Marek retorted. "Jenkins isn't just human anymore." Their voices faded as they moved down the corridor, leaving Jenkins to contemplate the precarious position he occupied between two worlds. As Jenkins slowly recovered, he became aware of a shift in the station's atmosphere, and not just the one he was allergic to. General Steele's presence seemed to have multiplied, with human military personnel appearing in increasing numbers throughout Nexus 1. During one of his now routine medical scans, Jenkins broached the subject with Dr. Voss. "Is it just me, or has security been beefed up?" he asked casually. Dr. Voss's lips thinned. "General Steele is using your condition as an excuse to increase human military presence. It's causing tension with the Bajoran contingent." Jenkins frowned. "That wasn't the plan. This station is supposed to be neutral territory." "Plans change," Dr. Voss said, her tone neutral, but her eyes betraying concern. "Especially when people are afraid." As Jenkins's treatment progressed, he noticed strange new sensations. The station's systems seemed to hum in tune with his thoughts. He found himself instinctively understanding the function of both human and Bajoran technology, even equipment he'd never encountered before. During a joint research session, Jenkins absently reached out and adjusted a Bajoran sensor array, optimizing its output. Marek stared at him, open-mouthed. "How did you do that?" the Bajoran scientist asked, his voice a mix of awe and unease. Jenkins blinked, surprised by his own actions. I'm not sure. It just felt right." This new ability didn't go unnoticed. Admiral Chen called a meeting with Jenkins, Dr. Voss, and Merrick to discuss the implications. "This could be a game-changer for our research," the Admiral said, leaning forward intently. "But we need to understand the extent of these new abilities." As they delved deeper into Jenkins's evolving capabilities, the ethical implications loomed large. How far could they push the boundaries of genetic modification? What were the long-term consequences? Amidst these swirling questions, the research team made a breakthrough. Analyzing data from both human and Bajoran genetic samples, they identified a key factor in the reproductive compatibility issues plaguing both species. Jenkins's excitement was palpable as he explained their findings to Admiral Chen and General Steele. "We've isolated a rare mineral that could potentially solve both species' fertility problems. It's found only on an unexplored planet in the Gamma Quadrant." Admiral Chen's eyes lit up, but General Steele's frown deepened. "An unexplored planet? That's a significant security risk." Despite the General's reservations, plans for an expedition to the planet quickly took shape. Jenkins, with his unique abilities and understanding of both species, was the natural choice to lead the mission. The announcement sent ripples through the station. Dr. Hartley confronted Jenkins in the lab, his face flushed with anger. "This is insanity," Hartley hissed. "You're in no condition to lead an away mission. Your loyalty to this project is admirable, Jenkins, but you're putting the entire mission at risk." Before Jenkins could respond, Merrick stepped between them. "Jenkins is the most qualified person for this mission, regardless of his current medical status. Your objections are noted, Dr. Hartley, but ultimately irrelevant." As tensions simmered on Nexus 1, a new threat emerged from the depths of space. Admiral Chen called an emergency meeting, her face grim as she delivered the news. "We've intercepted communications from a species known as the Tholians," she said, activating a holographic display of an alien fleet. "They've learned about the mineral and are mobilizing towards the planet. We need to move quickly if we're going to beat them there." The revelation galvanized the station into action. General Steele and the Bajoran military commander, Garel Toran, found themselves reluctantly working together to prepare for the possibility of confrontation with the Tholians. As the expedition launch date loomed, Jenkins pushed himself to the limit, working with Dr. Voss to stabilize his condition for space travel. The doctor's expertise, combined with Merrick's insights into Bajoran biology, yielded promising results. In the final hours before departure, Jenkins stood in the observation lounge, watching as the expedition ship was prepared for launch. The vastness of space stretched out before him, holding both promise and peril. Merrick joined him, their shoulders almost touching as they gazed out at the stars. "Are you ready for this?" the Bajoran asked softly. Jenkins took a deep breath, feeling the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty roiling within him. As they turned to head to the launch bay, alarms blared throughout the station. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the comm system, urgent and commanding. "All personnel to battle stations. Tholian ships detected on long-range sensors. Expedition team, prepare for immediate departure." Jenkins and Merrick exchanged a look of commitment before sprinting towards the docking bay. The race to the mysterious planet and the future of human-Bajoran relations had begun in earnest. Time seemed to compress as they raced through the station's corridors, the urgency of their mission amplified by the looming Tholian threat. They burst into the docking bay, where the sleek form of the Horizon awaited them. The ship hummed with potential energy, its advanced systems primed for the perilous journey ahead. Jenkins felt a surge of connection with the vessel, his modified physiology resonating with its cutting-edge technology. As they boarded, Dr. Voss was already at her station, fingers flying over the controls. "Pre-flight checks complete," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the air. Cloaking systems engaged and functioning at optimal levels. Jenkins took his place at the helm, Merrick settling into the seat beside him. The Bajoran's presence was a comforting constant amidst the whirlwind of change and danger. "Horizon, you are clear for departure." Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Godspeed and good hunting." With a final shared glance between the crew members, Jenkins initiated the launch sequence. The Horizon slipped from its berth like a phantom, invisible to both sensors and the naked eye as it glided past the Tholian ships now swarming the nearby space. As they cleared Nexus 1's immediate vicinity, Jenkins plotted a course for the unexplored planet, now designated Novus Prime. The ship's engines thrummed with power, propelling them towards their destination and the unknown challenges that awaited. Days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Jenkins spent hours in the ship's medical bay, working with Dr. Voss to stabilize his condition for the rigors ahead. Marek divided his time between assisting with Jenkins's treatment and poring over the scant data they had on Novus Prime. As they approached the planet, the first signs of trouble manifested. The Horizon shuddered, its systems flickering as they encountered the fringes of Novus Prime's turbulent atmosphere. Electromagnetic interference detected, Marek reported, his fingers dancing across his console. It's disrupting our sensors and communication systems. Jenkins gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control of the ship as they plunged into the roiling storm of energy that enveloped Novus Prime. Arcs of lightning danced across the view screen, bathing the bridge in eerie, pulsating light. "Brace for impact," Jenkins called out as they broke through the cloud layer. The Horizon bucked and pitched, but Jenkins's enhanced reflexes allowed him to guide the ship to a relatively smooth landing on a plateau overlooking a vast expanse of bioluminescent forest. As the team disembarked, the alien beauty of Novus Prime struck them into momentary silence. The air was thick with an electric charge, causing their hair to stand on end. Beneath their feet, the very ground seemed to pulse with life. Jenkins took a cautious step forward, and the vegetation around him responded, tendrils of light rippling outward from his presence. He gasped, overwhelmed by a sudden influx of sensory information. "Jenkins?" Marek's concerned voice cut through the mental static. "What's happening?" I can feel it," Jenkins breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "The whole ecosystem. It's like a vast network, and somehow I'm tapping into it." Dr. Voss was immediately at his side, scanner in hand. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Your hybrid physiology seems to be acting as an interface with the planet's biosphere. This could be invaluable for our search." As the team set up their base camp, Jenkins found himself increasingly attuned to the ebb and flow of energy around them. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure, opening up new avenues of perception while threatening to overwhelm his senses. Their work began in earnest, with Dr. Voss calibrating a portable scanner to Jenkins' unique biology. The device hummed to life, its readings providing a roadmap to potential xenothium deposits. Just as they were preparing for their first excursion, a priority alert blared from the Horizon's communication array. Dr. Voss rushed to the console, her face paling as she read the incoming message. "Tholian ships have entered orbit," she announced grimly. "We're out of time." The news galvanized the team into action. They split into two groups. Jenkins and Marek would lead the search for xenothium, while Dr. Voss coordinated from base camp and maintained contact with the Horizon. As Jenkins and Marek ventured into the dense undergrowth, the forest seemed to come alive around them. Bioluminescent fronds reached out, brushing against them with an almost curious touch. Jenkins found he could influence the plant's movements with a mere thought, clearing paths or creating barriers as needed. Their progress was swift but not without peril. The planet's unstable geomagnetic field caused sudden localized storms that played havoc with their equipment. During one such disturbance, Jenkins and Marek found themselves cut off from the rest of the team, the darkness around them broken only by the pulsing glow of the vegetation. "We need to find shelter," Marek shouted over the howling wind. Jenkins nodded, reaching out with his newfound senses to scan their surroundings. He detected a void in the living network beneath their feet, a cave system. "This way," he called, leading Marek towards a hidden entrance partially obscured by writhing vines. As they ducked inside, the storm's fury was muffled, replaced by an eerie stillness. The cavern stretched out before them, its walls lined with pulsating crystals that bathed everything in a soft blue glow. Jenkins's breath caught in his throat as recognition dawned. "Xenothium," he whispered, reaching out to touch one of the nearest crystals. The moment his fingers made contact, A jolt of energy surged through him. The crystal's glow intensified, and Jenkins felt a presence, alien yet unmistakably alive. Marek watched in amazement as the crystals around them began to resonate in harmony with Jenkins's touch. "They're responding to you," he said, his voice filled with awe and a hint of trepidation. As they collected samples, Jenkins couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. The crystals seemed to pulse in patterns, almost like a form of communication. He shared his observations with Marek, whose scientific curiosity warred with caution. "If these crystals are indeed sentient," Marek mused, "we may need to reconsider our entire approach to harvesting them." Their discussion was cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps. Jenkins and Marek quickly doused their lights, pressing themselves against the cavern wall. 3 figures entered the chamber, their crystalline exoskeletons glinting in the Xenothium's glow. Tholian scouts. Jenkins felt a surge of panic, knowing they were outmatched in a direct confrontation. As the Tholians moved closer to their hiding spot, he reached out desperately with his mind, seeking help from the living network that surrounded them. To his astonishment, the bioluminescent plants responded. Tendrils of light began to dance and swirl around the cavern, creating a dazzling, disorienting display. The Tholians chittered in confusion, their sensors overwhelmed by the sudden burst of activity. Seizing their chance, Jenkins and Marek slipped past the distracted scouts and deeper into the cavern system. As they put distance between themselves and their pursuers, Jenkins marveled at the extent of his connection to Novus Prime's ecosystem. "That was incredible," Marek said as they paused to catch their breath. "But it also means the Tholians are already on the surface. We need to warn the others." Jenkins nodded grimly, knowing that their discovery of the Xenothium deposits was now a race against time. As they began to navigate the twisting tunnels in search of an exit, he could feel the living crystals pulsing around them, their alien consciousness brushing against his mind. The true nature of Novus Prime was revealing itself, layer by layer. Jenkins realized that their mission had become far more complex than a simple search for a rare mineral. They were on the brink of a discovery that could reshape the understanding of life itself, if they could survive long enough to share it with the rest of the galaxy. With renewed urgency, Jenkins and Marek pressed on through the caverns, the fate of 3 species and an entire planet hanging in the balance. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Jenkins drew strength from the living energy that flowed through Novus Prime and, increasingly, through him. As Jenkins and Marek navigated the twisting caverns, the Xenothium crystals pulsed with increasing intensity. Suddenly, a massive surge of energy engulfed Jenkins, lifting him off his feet and suspending him in mid-air. "Jenkins!" Marek cried out, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. Jenkins felt as if his entire being was being rewritten. Every cell in his body resonated with the planet's energy. When the light faded, he stood transformed. Intricate patterns of bioluminescence danced across his skin, mimicking the flora of Novus Prime. I can see everything," Jenkins gasped, overwhelmed by the influx of sensory information. He could feel the planet's ecosystem as an extension of himself, every plant, crystal, and creature connected in a vast, living network. Marek approached cautiously, scanner in hand. "Your hybrid physiology has fully integrated with the Xenothium energy. The readings are off the charts." Before Jenkins could respond, a distant explosion rocked the cavern. The battle above had intensified. "We need to stop this," Jenkins said, his voice resonating with newfound power. "I think I can." Without waiting for a response, Jenkins closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. The cave walls seemed to melt away as his consciousness expanded, encompassing the entire battlefield. He saw the Tholian ships exchanging fire with human and Bajoran vessels, ground troops locked in combat amidst the bioluminescent forest. Drawing on the planet's energy, Jenkins projected a massive energy field that enveloped the warring factions. Weapons fell silent, ships stalled in midair, and combatants found themselves unable to move. In their minds, vivid images bloomed. The intricate web of life on Novus Prime, the devastation their conflict was causing, and the potential for harmony. Jenkins' transformed consciousness bridged the gap between species, allowing for a moment of shared understanding. The Tholian commander, Kraz, was the first to break the silence. His crystalline form glittered as he lowered his weapon. This power, it is beyond our comprehension. We must reassess our approach. General Steele of the Human Forces and Commander Geralt Toren of the Bajorans followed suit. Ordering their troops to stand down, the battlefield fell silent, an uneasy truce settling over the combatants. Dr. Voss emerged from the horizon, her eyes wide as she took in Jenkins's transformed appearance. Jenkins, your readings are unprecedented. The Xenothium has fundamentally altered your physiology. As the factions gathered, Dr. Voss presented her findings on the Xenothium crystals. Our research indicates that with careful, sustainable harvesting, Xenothium could benefit all our species. It has the potential to solve numerous biological issues, including our fertility problems. Commander Kraz chittered thoughtfully. The applications for Tholian biotechnology could be significant. We are intrigued by this possibility. The three factions entered into tense negotiations, with Jenkins serving as a mediator. His enhanced abilities allowed him to bridge communication gaps, projecting thoughts and emotions to foster understanding between the diverse groups. As talks progressed, Jenkins felt a growing strain on his body. He stumbled, nearly collapsing before Merrick caught him. "Jenkins!" Dr. Voss rushed to his side, scanner whirring. "Your system is destabilizing. The energy influx was too great." Working frantically, Dr. Voss and Merrick discovered that Jenkins now required regular exposure to Xenothium to maintain his new physiology. This revelation added urgency to the negotiations, as Jenkins's condition tied him inexorably to Novus Prime. The three species reached an agreement to establish a permanent joint research base on the planet, with Jenkins as the key liaison. It was a historic moment of cooperation, but one tinged with the weight of Jenkins's sacrifice. As preparations for the base began, the planet's electromagnetic storms intensified dramatically. Communication systems crackled with interference, and supply ships struggled to maintain stable flight paths. Jenkins, his mind attuned to the planet's rhythms, sensed something amiss. These storms, they're not natural. The planet is defending itself. Closing his eyes, Jenkins reached out to the collective consciousness of Novus Prime. His mind merged with the planet's awareness, and vast alien intelligence that defied easy comprehension. Through this connection, Jenkins learned the truth. Novus Prime was a living entity, and the Xenothium crystals were vital to its existence. The storms were a defensive response to the presence of offworlders and the threat they posed to the crystal formations. When Jenkins shared this revelation, it forced a complete reevaluation of the Alliance's plans. They could not simply harvest the Xenothium as a resource. They needed to find a way to coexist with the living planet. Jenkins became the crucial intermediary, explaining the planet's needs and concerns to the Alliance, while also conveying their intentions back to Novus Prime. It was an enormous responsibility, one that greatly troubled on him. As news of these events reached Earth and Bajor, both societies grappled with the implications. Scientific communities clamored for more information about the living planet and Jenkins's transformation. Political leaders debated the potential benefits and risks of further involvement with Novus Prime. On the planet's surface, Jenkins worked tirelessly with Dr. Voss, Merrick, and representatives from all three species to develop a sustainable plan for coexistence. His unique position as a hybrid being, connected to both the planet and the off-world species, placed him at the center of this new era of interstellar relations. Yet the strain of his new role was evident. Jenkins' body glowed with bioluminescent patterns, a constant reminder of his transformation. He required regular treatments in a specially designed Xenothium chamber to maintain his health. One evening, as Jenkins stood at the edge of the newly established base, gazing out at the pulsing forest beyond, Merrick approached him. "How are you holding up?" the Bajoran asked, concern evident in his voice. Jenkins managed a small smile. "It's overwhelming. I can feel the entire planet, Merrick, its hopes, its fears, and the weight of three species' futures on my shoulders." Merrick placed a comforting hand on Jenkins's shoulder, careful to avoid the glowing patterns on his skin. "You're not alone in this. We're all here to support you." As they stood there, the bioluminescent forest seemed to pulse in sync with Jenkins's own glowing skin. The beauty of the moment was tempered by the knowledge of the challenges that lay ahead. The alliance was fragile, the planet's trust tentative, and Jenkins' own existence hung in a delicate balance between human and something entirely new. In the distance, a Tholian ship descended towards the base, carrying new supplies and personnel. The real work of building a lasting peace and understanding was just beginning. Jenkins watched as the Tholian ship touched down, its crystalline structure refracting the bioluminescent glow of the surrounding flora. The sight was breathtaking, but he couldn't shake the growing unease that churned within him. As the days passed, Jenkins's role as intermediary between Novus Prime and the Interstellar Alliance became increasingly complex. He spent hours each day in deep communion with the planet, his mind expanding across its vast network of life. But the strain was beginning to show. One morning, as Jenkins emerged from his specially designed Xenothium chamber, he stumbled, nearly collapsing to the ground. Dr. Voss rushed to his side, her scanner whirring. "Jenkins, your readings are all over the place," she said, brow furrowed with concern. "The Xenothium in your system is becoming unstable." Before Jenkins could respond, an alarm blared through the research base. Marek burst into the room, his face pale. "We've got a problem. The electromagnetic field is fluctuating wildly. It's affecting our equipment and the Tholian ships in orbit." Jenkins closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to the planet's consciousness. He gasped as a wave of distress washed over him. "It's the crystals," he said, his voice strained. "They're agitated. I can feel their energy pulsing erratically." Dr. Voss's eyes widened as she studied her readings. "Jenkins, your hybrid physiology, it's somehow connected to these fluctuations. When the crystals become unstable, so do you." Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The newly established research base struggled to maintain power as the electromagnetic disturbances intensified. Tholian and human ships alike reported navigation issues, some nearly crashing as they attempted to land. In the midst of the chaos, Jenkins found himself at the center of a fierce debate. General Steele, his face set in grim lines, addressed the Alliance leaders. "We need to find a way to control these fluctuations," he said, his voice hard. "And that means finding a way to control Jenkins. He's the key to all of this." Commander Kraz chittered in disagreement. "Jenkins is not a tool to be manipulated. His connection to this planet is sacred." As the argument escalated, Jenkins felt a sharp pain lance through his body. He doubled over, his skin flaring with intense bioluminescence. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Dr. Voss rushed to his side, scanner in hand. "His system is overloading," she announced, her voice tight with worry. "We need to find a way to stabilize him, or we could lose both Jenkins and our connection to the planet." In the days that followed, Dr. Voss and Marek worked tirelessly to develop a solution. Jenkins spent hours in the Xenothium chamber, his body racked with pain as the planet's energy surged through him. Finally, after countless failed attempts, they presented their creation, a specialized containment suit designed to regulate Jenkins' energy absorption and emission. "It's not a perfect solution," Dr. Voss explained as she helped Jenkins into the sleek silvery suit, "but it should help manage the flow of Xenothium energy through your system." As the suit activated, Jenkins felt a sense of relief wash over him. The constant pain and disorientation he'd been experiencing faded to a dull ache, but as he caught his reflection in a nearby monitor, he barely recognized himself. The suit covered him from neck to toe, its surface rippling with the same bioluminescent patterns as the planet's flora. "How do you feel?" Marek asked, his voice tinged with concern. Jenkins flexed his hands, watching as the suit moved with him like a second skin. "Better," he said, "but different, more separate from everything." As Jenkins adjusted to life in the suit, a new arrival to Novus Prime stirred up fresh controversy. Dr. Zara Zan, a renowned Tholian bioengineer, strode into the base, her crystalline form glittering with nearly unleashed excitement. "I've studied the data you've collected," she announced to the assembled leaders, and I believe I have a solution that will benefit all our species. Dr. Zan's proposal was as ambitious as it was controversial. Use the Xenothium to create a new hybrid race, one that could thrive on Novus Prime and potentially colonize similar planets. Imagine, she said, her voice resonating with passion, a species that combines the best traits of humans, Bajorans, and Tholians, perfectly adapted to Xenothium-rich environments. We could open up entire new worlds for colonization. Jenkins listened to Dr. Zan's proposal with growing interest. Initially skeptical, he found himself drawn to the potential of her vision. The idea of creating a new species that could truly live in harmony with planets like Novus Prime was enticing. However, his growing alignment with Dr. Zan's ideas created tension with Merrick. One evening, as they stood watching the bioluminescent forest pulse with light, Merrick voiced his concerns. "This isn't right, Jenkins," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We're talking about fundamentally altering the course of evolution. It's too risky, too unpredictable." Jenkins sighed, the sound distorted slightly by his containment suit. "But what if it's the key to true coexistence, to ensuring that we don't destroy planets like Novus Prime in our quest for resources?" Their debate was cut short by a violent tremor that shook the ground beneath their feet. As alarms blared across the base, Jenkins reached out with his mind, connecting to the planet's consciousness. What he felt chilled him to his core. "The planet," he gasped, his voice strained. "It's in pain. The Xenothium harvesting, it's causing damage we couldn't have anticipated." As reports flooded in from across Novus Prime, the extent of the crisis became clear. Vast swathes of the bioluminescent forest had gone dark, their light extinguished as the Xenothium was extracted from the surrounding soil. Weather patterns across the planet had become erratic, with violent storms materializing without warning. In an emergency meeting of the Alliance leaders, Jenkins made a fateful decision. "We need to go to the planet's core," he announced, his voice firm despite the fear churning in his gut. "I believe that's where the source of Novus Prime's consciousness resides. If we can establish a direct link, we might find a way to balance our needs with the planet's." General Steele's eyes gleamed with interest. "A mission to the planet's core? That's exactly the kind of bold action we need. I'll lead the expedition myself." As preparations for the mission began, Jenkins found himself at the center of a maelstrom of activity. Dr. Voss worked to modify his containment suit for the extreme conditions they would face, while Dr. Zan provided insights into the potential biological effects of prolonged Xenothium exposure. The night before the expedition was set to leave, Jenkins stood at the edge of the base, gazing out at the dimming forest. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, heavier than ever before. The fate of not just 3 species, but an entire living world, rested on the outcome of their mission. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jenkins joined the rest of the expedition team. General Steele stood at the head of the group, his face set in determined lines. Dr. Voss checked and rechecked her medical equipment, while Merrick ran final diagnostics on their drilling vehicle. Dr. Zan stood slightly apart, her crystalline form vibrating with terrifying excitement. As they prepared to board the vehicle that would take them into the depths of Novus Prime, Jenkins took a deep breath, feeling the Xenothium energy pulse through his containment suit. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the expedition team descended into the planet's depths, the air grew thick with crackling energy. Jenkins felt a resonance building within him, his containment suit humming in response to the increasing Xenothium concentration. They reached the core chamber, a vast cavern pulsing with swirling, iridescent energy. Jenkins stepped forward, drawn by an inexorable pull. "This is it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the thrumming power surrounding them. General Steele's eyes widened. "Jenkins, wait!" But it was too late. Jenkins reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the energy vortex. In an instant, he was engulfed. The chamber exploded with blinding light. The team stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Dr. Voss fumbled with her scanner, trying to make sense of the readings. "His vitals are off the charts," she shouted over the roar of energy. For what seemed like an eternity, Jenkins floated in a sea of knowledge and power. He felt the planet's consciousness merge with his own, centuries of history and wisdom flooding his mind. When the light finally dimmed, the team blinked away the after-images, struggling to focus on the figure before them. Jenkins stood in the center of the chamber, transformed. His skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, pulsing in time with the energy around them. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly intelligence, seeming to look through and beyond his companions. "Jenkins," Merrick's voice quavered, "are you okay?" Jenkins turned, a slight smile playing across his lips. When he spoke, his voice resonated with newfound power and understanding. "I am more than okay. I am complete." He reached out, not physically, but with his mind. The team gasped as Jenkins's thoughts flowed into theirs, sharing the incredible knowledge he had gained. "Novus Prime," Jenkins explained, his words echoing in their minds, "is the last of an ancient race of living planets. It has waited millennia for species worthy of its partnership." Images flashed through their consciousness, vast networks of bioluminescent life, civilizations rising and falling, the patient vigil of a sentient world. The crystal instabilities, Jenkins continued, were a test. Novus Prime was searching for symbiotic partners capable of understanding its true nature. General Steele's skepticism warred with the undeniable evidence flooding his mind. "And now? What does this mean for us, for Earth?" Jenkins's eyes seemed to peer into the future. "It means a new era of cooperation and advancement, but it requires balance. We must work in harmony with Novus Prime, not exploit it." Dr. Zan vibrated with excitement, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's glow. "The potential is staggering. Imagine the bioengineering applications." "Indeed," Jenkins nodded, "but it must be managed responsibly. I propose a new governing body with representatives from all our species and Novus Prime itself." As the implications sank in, Jenkins gestured towards a shadowy alcove. "There's more. Follow me." The team trailed behind as Jenkins led them to a massive cavern. Rows upon rows of dormant xenothium crystals lined the walls, their potential energy palpable. "These crystals," Jenkins explained, "can power interstellar travel. They're the key to ending resource conflicts between our peoples." General Steele's eyes gleamed with the possibilities. Dr. Voss was already considering the medical breakthroughs such power could enable. Even Merrick, still processing his friend's transformation, couldn't deny the potential for lasting peace. As they prepared to return to the surface, a tremor shook the cavern. Jenkins closed his eyes, reaching out with his enhanced senses. "The base," he said, eyes snapping open. "It's in danger. We need to hurry." They rushed back to their transport, ascending to the surface at maximum speed. As they emerged, chaos greeted them. The research base was in pandemonium, with equipment malfunctioning and xenothium crystals pulsing erratically. Jenkins strode forward, his body glowing intensely. He reached out with both his mind and his hands, connecting with the crystals. Slowly, the erratic pulses steadied, falling into a harmonious rhythm. As word of Jenkins's transformation spread, reactions varied wildly. Some hailed him as a messianic figure, while others eyed him with suspicion and fear. An emergency council was hastily convened. Representatives from Earth, Bajor, and the Tholian homeworld gathered, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension as Jenkins laid out his plan for joint governance and sustainable xenothium harvesting. His ability to communicate telepathically proved invaluable, allowing him to bridge language barriers and convey complex concepts instantly. Yet even as progress was made, a new threat loomed. Alarms blared across the compound. Jenkins' eyes unfocused briefly as he tapped into the planet's awareness. "We're under attack," he announced. "Extremists from all three of our species. They're after the xenothium." As panic began to spread, Jenkins's voice cut through the chaos. "We must stand together. Novus Prime will help us, but we have to work as one." He reached out, channeling xenothium energy into key individuals, General Steele, Merrick, Dr. Zan, and others. They gasped as temporary power flowed through them, granting enhanced strength, speed, and awareness. Outside, the battlefield came alive. Bioluminescent flora responded to Jenkins's will, creating barriers and disorienting the attackers. The defenders, empowered by Jenkins and united in purpose, coordinated with unprecedented efficiency. The battle was fierce but brief. As the last of the attackers surrendered, a new sense of unity settled over the defenders. They had faced a threat together and emerged victorious. In the battle's aftermath, Jenkins stood before the assembled representatives of Earth, Bajor, and the Tholian homeworld. His form shimmered with almost unchecked energy as he spoke. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I present to you the framework for the Trilateral Xenothium Council. Together, we will forge a future of collaboration and shared prosperity." As the representatives began to discuss the details, Jenkins felt the weight of his new role settle upon him. He was no longer simply human, nor was he purely of Novus Prime. He was the bridge between worlds, the key to a delicate balance that could reshape the galaxy. His gaze met Merrick's across the room. In his friend's eyes, he saw a mix of pride, concern, and a touch of sadness. Jenkins knew that his transformation had changed everything, including his closest relationships. It was a price he would have to bear for the greater good. As the council session continued, Jenkins's mind reached out, feeling the pulse of Novus Prime beneath him and the hopes of 3 species around him. The challenges ahead were immense, but for the first time, he felt truly ready to face them. As the council session adjourned, Jenkins found himself standing alone on a balcony, overlooking the bioluminescent forests of Novus Prime. The pulsing lights below mirrored the swirling thoughts in his mind. He was the nexus of a new interstellar paradigm, a bridge between worlds, yet he felt increasingly disconnected from his human origins. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Merrick's innocent request to observe human breeding, which had nearly given him a heart attack. It seemed like a lifetime ago, yet it was the catalyst that had set this extraordinary chain of events in motion. As he pondered this, an idea began to take shape. Jenkins turned from the balcony and strode purposefully to the main conference room. The representatives were still gathered, discussing the finer points of the newly formed Trilateral Xenothium Council. "Esteemed colleagues," Jenkins announced, his voice carrying a hint of the planet's resonance, "I propose we commemorate the formation of our alliance with a grand celebration." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. General Steele leaned forward, intrigued. "What did you have in mind, Jenkins?" "A showcase of our cultures," Jenkins explained, his excitement growing. "A festival that highlights the unique aspects of humans, Bajorans, and Tholians. And at its heart, a symbolic ceremony of interspecies union." Dr. Zan's crystalline form vibrated with curiosity. "Fascinating, but how would such a union be possible, given our physiological differences?" Jenkins smiled. "That's where you and Dr. Voss come in. I believe we can develop a method for temporary genetic harmonization. It would allow volunteers to experience the physiological characteristics of other species for a brief time." The room erupted in a flurry of discussion. Some representatives voiced enthusiasm, while others expressed concern. Jenkins reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling the ebb and flow of emotions in the room. "This isn't just about celebration," he continued, his voice cutting through the chatter. "It's an opportunity for true understanding, to walk in each other's shoes, so to speak." Over the next few weeks, preparations for the celebration consumed the base. Jenkins worked closely with Dr. Voss and Dr. Zan, poring over complex genetic algorithms and Xenothium energy patterns. They made breakthrough after breakthrough, each success bringing them closer to their goal. As the day of the celebration dawned, Novus Prime seemed to pulse with anticipation. The clearing chosen for the event had been transformed. Bioluminescent vines twisted into intricate patterns, forming a natural amphitheater. Decorations from Earth, Bajor, and the Tholian homeworld adorned the space, creating a vibrant tapestry of interstellar cultures. Representatives from all 3 worlds filed into the clearing, humans in their crisp uniforms, Bajorans with their ornate earrings catching the light, and Tholians, their crystalline bodies refracting the bioluminescence in dazzling patterns. The ceremony began with a series of performances. A troupe of human dancers took the stage first, their movements telling the story of humanity's journey to the stars. Their graceful leaps and spins drew gasps of admiration from the alien spectators. Next came a group of Bajoran clerics, their voices rising in a haunting chant. The melody seemed to resonate with the very essence of Novus Prime, causing the bioluminescent plants to pulse in rhythm with the song. The Tholians followed with a display that left the audience in awe. Their bodies became conduits for bioelectric energy, creating a light show that painted the sky with swirling patterns of color and light. As the final notes of the performances faded, Jenkins stepped forward. Beside him stood Merrick, General Steele, and Commander Kraz, a high-ranking Tholian. "Today we stand on the brink of a new era," Jenkins began, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "An era of cooperation, understanding, and shared prosperity. To symbolize this new beginning, we 4 volunteers will undergo the genetic harmonization process." Dr. Voss approached, carrying a device that hummed with xenothium energy. She placed it in the center of the group, then stepped back, her fingers dancing over a control panel. A soft glow enveloped the 4 volunteers. The audience watched in hushed anticipation as the light intensified, obscuring the figures within. When it finally faded, a collective gasp rose from the crowd. Jenkins stood transformed, his body a perfect blend of all 3 species. His skin shimmered with bioluminescence, while hints of Bajoran ridges and Tholian crystalline structures accented his form. Beside him, Merrick's typically pronounced Bajoran nose had softened, taking on human characteristics. General Steele's skin now bore intricate Bajoran-like patterns, and Commander Kraz's rigid exoskeleton had become more fluid, reflecting human flexibility. The 4 joined hands, and a visible current of xenothium energy flowed between them. This energy spread outward, washing over the assembled crowd. For a brief, breathtaking moment, every being present felt a profound connection. Minds linked, sharing a vision of a future where their differences were not erased, but celebrated. As the effect subsided, Jenkins addressed the assembly once more. "This is the power of unity," he said, his voice resonating with newfound depth. "Not the erasure of our unique traits, but the strength we find in our diversity." The ceremony concluded with a carefully controlled exchange of genetic material between the 4 volunteers, overseen by Dr. Voss. This symbolic blending was sealed within a xenothium crystal to be displayed as a permanent reminder of their union. As the formal proceedings ended and the gathering took on a more celebratory atmosphere, Jenkins found a quiet moment with Merrick. They stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as humans, Bajorans, and Tholians mingled freely. "Did you ever imagine," Jenkins asked, a smile playing on his transformed features, "that your curiosity about human breeding would lead to all this?" Merrick laughed, the sound musical in her partially human voice. "Never in my wildest dreams," she admitted. "Though I must say, this is far more interesting than simply observing human mating rituals." Jenkins took her hand, feeling the unique blend of Bajoran and human characteristics. "Perhaps," he said, his tone growing serious, "we could continue to explore these interspecies relationships, both as diplomatic partners and something more?" Merrick's eyes, now shimmering with the same bioluminescence that coursed through Jenkins, met his. "I would like that very much," she said softly. As they stood there hand in hand, Jenkins felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced since his transformation. He was still the bridge between worlds, the key to this delicate balance, but now he had an anchor to his humanity as well. The celebration continued long into the night, the bioluminescent forest pulsing with the combined joy of 3 species and 1 living planet. It was more than a political alliance or a scientific breakthrough. It was the dawn of a new understanding, a first step towards a future where the boundaries between species blurred and the galaxy itself became a grand, interconnected community. And at the heart of it all stood Jenkins, no longer just a xenobiologist, but a living symbol of what they could all become together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.